is an Unspoiled Network podcast.
This is Unspoiled, covering Hounded, Book 1 of the Iron Druid series by Kevin Hearn. Chapters 11, 12, 13, 14, and 15. In these chapters, Atticus gets a visit from another witch, another fairy queen, goddess, what have you, and some very irritated policemen. Doesn't go super well for him in any of these cases. Welcome to Spoil Me. Welcome to the show, everybody. I am Natasha, and this episode of Iron Druid is brought to you by Susan Hayes. Thank you very much, Susan, for commissioning this episode. I don't think she's going to be able to make it to this crowdcast, but, we'll see who shows up. There's nobody here at the moment. I think this is the first one I've done where I've been completely by myself the whole time. This section of Hounded was really eventful. I mean, this book so far has been packed. And I feel like that is a really good way to go when you've got this sort of, humorous, it's urban fantasy, yes. But there's like an urban comedy, like there's so much humor layered in here that calling it that doesn't seem to really do it justice. And humor benefits a lot from continuous action. So these chapters, first of all, let's talk about the fact that with other books that I've been covering, I say I'll do 50 pages, and that usually is like 1 or 2 chapters. Sometimes 3, but usually 2 max. And for these books, it is 5. And it's been 5 every single time. Shit is moving right along. So Chapter 11 begins with Atticus and Leaf standing outside of his house with their hands in the air, and the cops have their guns drawn and they tell him to drop the sword, which I had been theorizing how the hell they could see it last episode when the camouflage was supposed to still be on it. And it turns out that when he yelled drop the sword, the cop was actually just saying that as a precaution, because what was reported by the neighbor across the street was that there had been somebody cutting up a bunch of people on the front lawn with a sword. So they just decided to err on the side of caution and say drop the sword, even though they actually can't quite see it yet. So my favorite part of this is, "Good evening, gentlemen," Leaf said smoothly. Neither of us raised our hands. "Oh, saucy. I am an attorney for Mr. O'Sullivan here." All of the cops looked at him standing there serenely in his suit and got real quiet. "I am an attorney" is a trigger phrase for cops. It tells them they have to go slow and follow procedures or their case will get tossed out of court. It means that they wouldn't be able to wave their guns around and bully me into anything. Unfortunately, it also told them that I needed an attorney at my house after normal business hours. If I were a mind reader, I would be hearing the same thing from each one of their heads. This bastard is so guilty, he already has his lawyer here. That's a pretty good start to this section. So, Officer Benton is the one that takes the lead on this one and tells them about the report from the neighbor, and he wants to search the premises, which Leaf does not allow him to do. A lot of what goes on in these 2 chapters, in the climate that we are in right now, feels especially gratifying to read, except for the fact that you know that if Atticus were a black guy, maybe this wouldn't work out for him the same way. By if and may, I mean were and definitely would not. And so it's like kind of nice to read an attempted bullying of someone by police being shut down so effectively. The only thing that's a little frustrating about it is the fact that Atticus is indeed guilty of everything that he is being accused of. But, they wouldn't understand what was going on. So it's really like if they got involved, it would only make everything 10 times worse and probably more people would die. So, yeah, he winds up like keeping them from going into Atticus's house without a warrant. Thank you, Leaf, for all of this. And they also already have the neighbor under Leaf's thrall, so he's going to retract everything that he said, and he gets cited, I think, for a false 911 call, which, again, wouldn't it be nice if the law actually worked that way? But unfortunately, false 911 calls are happening all the fucking time, and nobody ever gets in trouble for it, apparently. So, yeah, I have a lot of complicated feelings about this section just because of the myriad reports that we hear of people of color being bullied and hurt and humiliated and killed. And all of this stuff being swept right under the carpet. And it's just, like I said, a love-hate thing where you're reading this and you're like, oh my God, this is so not how this would probably go down. But also, it is sort of nice to read everything working out the way that it is supposed to. The law being abided the way that it is supposed to be by the police. And being forced to, when they're obviously not inclined to do that. So it's a pretty fair representation of police behavior. It's not actually like an idealized version because of their characters. It's just because of the presence at all times of his attorneys. Like, he's always got backup. So that's fair. So then he tries to say, well, what is he hiding? And Leaf is like, he's not hiding anything. You're just trying to go into his house without a warrant to search for something based on a falsified 911 call. And Officer Benton can feel, like in his gut with that cop instinct that some cops have, that Atticus is up to some shit. But obviously there's no way to prove that. There's no way for him to get in there with fucking Leaf standing in his way. And there's this lovely little moment of, have you got anything to say, mister? He sneered at me. Why did we get called out here? Well, I said, I cannot say for certain, of course, but it might be because Mr. Submergian across the street there really doesn't like me. You see, about 3 years ago, my dog escaped and pooped on his lawn. I apologized and cleaned it up, but he's never forgiven me. Hey, I heard that, Oberon called from the porch. You told me to poop on his lawn. Yeah, so what's your point? I asked. You're making it sound like I'm some ordinary dog who just poops anywhere. I know, but it's going to get that Submergian guy in trouble. Oh, well, that's okay then. I don't like him. Classic. Listen, Oberon remains the MVP. So finally the cop leaves and Leaf tells Atticus that he has some buddies, some ghoul friends. Get it? You see my pun? Ghoul friends? Who can take care of all the bodies of those Fir Bolgs in his backyard if he wants, but it's going to cost him. So there's a little bit of an argument here where Atticus doesn't want to give up yet more blood because he's already weakened. He's been in a pretty terrible fight just now. And in the end, Leaf is like, listen, I know you're probably not going to live too much longer, so forgive me for not giving you my labor on credit. But no, you better pay me now. And the reason that Leaf decides that Atticus isn't going to live that long is because Atticus just goes and blurts out the fact that he killed Brez earlier. This moment, I was just like, dude, what is going on with you? He says, what are the odds of you surviving until morning? I think they're excellent. I was warned about the arrival of Brez and the Fir Bolgs, and both now have been dispatched. Brez is dead? The former king of the Tuatha de Danann? There's so many names in here I can't pronounce, guys. Manan and McLear take me for a fool. I shouldn't have told him that. It was too late to backpedal, though. If I lied, he'd know it. Aye, he lost his head up the street moments before I arrived. And you did it? Guilty. Then I want all 3 glasses tonight, Atticus, and to hell with your healing. Brighid is going to kill you, and this will be my last drink. Spoiler alert, Brighid does not kill him. So he calls the ghouls, who I love. He's like, there's probably going to be too much for them to eat, but they do have a refrigerated truck because they are very practical. So they'll take it to go, which is just, I love this whole thing so much. The next chapter opens with Atticus waking up in his backyard because he slept on the ground in order to use earth energy to heal himself, which it didn't even occur to me that was an option, but that seems pretty rad. Like, I'm surprised he just doesn't sleep out there all the time. I wonder if there's like a limit to the kind of benefit that he can get. Is he just like a battery where he can just top up and that's as far as he can go? Because he can summon extra energy to pull some pretty amazing magic. So if he soaked it in, would that like do anything? Could he have like extra, like external battery packs that he could just, so that he doesn't necessarily have to be touching the earth in order to tap it? Like, I guess what I'm sort of having in mind with this is like the force rings that Dresden wears, that it's a buildup of kinetic energy, and he just, stores this energy in these rings and is able to release them on command when he needs to. So that would be pretty rad if he could do that. At the same time, all of Atticus's magic it comes to him much more easily than Dresden's magic does. So there is a risk of him becoming severely overpowered, because there are some points during this where I was just like, wow, that was a little too easy, actually. So when he wakes up, he's almost completely healed. He's still very sore. Sore from the fight, but also sore from just sleeping on the ground, because that sucks. Sleeping on the ground sucks. Camping is terrible. Don't at me. So he gets up and realizes, this tickled me so much, that they didn't do like the best job of cleaning up all the blood the night before because it was dark and they weren't seeing some of the worst patches of it. So he has to get a hose and like hose down his driveway and his lawn, and some of it really sticks to the grass and turns it pink. And it's the kind of thing that like maybe nobody will notice, but it's nerve-wracking for him for it to be right out there, especially when the cops show up a few minutes later. He's in the middle of eating breakfast after he washes up the blood, and there is a headline that says Ranger death caused by canine in the paper. And it turns out that they were not only able to figure out that it was a dog who attacked this ranger, they are able to figure out that it's an Irish wolfhound, which he points out is not a usual, like, oh, really? I didn't know that they had lab reports that could isolate breeds. It definitely seems like somebody is being led around by the hand. Oberon's ears pricked up as he swiveled his head toward the front room. Someone is coming to knock on the door, he said. So he just finishes reading this and the cops are already at his door. Like, again, yeah, this is definitely somebody being led around and shown where to go and told what to do. He's being targeted. So this is the part where I was kind of like, this is very easy. He camouflages Oberon really quickly. He camouflages the sword, again, just, out of expedience, I guess, just in case. And later he camouflages all his plants, and he does a lot of camouflaging in these few chapters. And I guess my problem, I don't even want to say it's a problem. That's sort of unfair, because in a universe that's being painted as there being consequences for things, him having the ability to cast these sort of sustained spells, even if they were sustained with him around, I would have less of a this is a little bit easy feeling about it. But when later on, when the cops come by his shop and they've clearly already gone to his house and rifled through his stuff, he isn't home, but the camouflage on his plants in the yard still sticks. And that's the kind of thing that I'm just like, okay, if that's how things are going to work in this universe, I guess I'll get used to it. But it does give me pause that you can just cast something, walk away, and I guess until you die, it's just going to remain. That seems a little too good to be true. But so is healing from the earth. I guess the feeling, though, there for me is he spent the whole night on the, like, laying there. It was hours and hours and hours and hours. That's not really easy, you know? And he needed to be in contact with you. He couldn't even, like, lay out there on a friggin', like, blanket, you know? He had to be in direct contact. He has to be barefoot when he's standing on it, sort of thing. So, yeah, I don't know. Just a little bit, like, side-eyeing and hoping that there aren't too many spells like this that he can just throw out and have it stick around for as long as he needs without him having to exert any further effort or refresh them or anything like that. So these cops that show up at his door, they intend to, like, try and come inside and grill him while they're in his kitchen. And he kind of circumvents that right out of the gate, literally, by stepping outside and being like, hey, can I help you? And they ask if we can talk inside. And he's like, no, it's a really nice day. Why don't we just chill out here? I get, like, at this point, I wasn't, if his dog is camouflaged, I wasn't entirely sure why he doesn't just let them inside, but I guess it turns out to be a good precaution because we wind up finding out that there's, like, a binding on one of them, and that there's a potential for him to see through the camouflage that's on Oberyn. He isn't sure about it yet, and it turns out that the binding does not enable him to see through any camouflage. It specifically allows him to see the sword. So he wouldn't have been able to spot Oberyn, but that's not what they're actually there for. So whether he can see Oberyn or not is sort of beside the point, really, in the end. Even though that is allegedly the reason they're there. So there's two guys, a younger one who's, like, thinner and trying to audition for a Tarantino movie. And then there's a guy who's a little heavier and Hispanic. And I'm trying to remember what his name is. Carlos Jimenez from the Phoenix Police, and this is Detective Darren Fagles. Spoiler alert, Fagles is a big fucking... loose cannon just feels too kind. He is a dumbass meathead who lets his anger control him, and he needs to get a grip. And as we see later, things go a little bit out of control pretty quickly with him. So they talk outside and they grill him about Oberyn, and he does use the sort of pre-planned approach that him and Hawk talked about last time, which is that he's going to say that yes, I did have this wolfhound. That is why he is registered to me, but he ran away. I haven't seen him in a while. You can come and check my house and see that he's not here if you want. He doesn't invite them to do that, but that is an option. And thank God he's, like, got the wolfhound with him at his shop when they go and search his house, because they could nail him with that if they wanted. Even though, once again, that's not really the point. So he sticks with his story, but he does it in such a way that he is giving it away to them that he knows more than he's saying. Like, he can't just be the baffled, confused citizen. No, my dog ran away. Oh my God, someone was hurt. That's so terrible. Like, he can't do that. Atticus is a little more like me in this, where I was thinking about this the other day. There's I've been covering Veronica Mars, and there's a scene where she has to pretend to be a real idiot in order to get some information. And she does it without compunction because that's what she needs to do. And I was saying how my ego is obviously too big to deal with pretending to be stupid, even though it would help me out. Like, I don't have that kind of humility, I suppose. And someone in the comments, they said that that's why I was never good at acting, because you have to be okay with looking like an idiot. And it made me stop and think about it, and I didn't really put together until later what it was. But for me, acting is very different, because people are aware when they see you that you are acting. You're on stage, or you're, in a rehearsal, or you're doing exercises for a class, and people know whatever you're doing is not who you are. But if you are pretending to be someone else, like really legit be, and they are going to treat you as if that is who you are, that's the part that I have a problem with. I was fine with acting classes. I would go full commitment, whole hog, like no restraint or shame in that regard whatsoever. It's this kind of thing where you're being interviewed by cops and they're going to use that assessment of you to try and get what they want, and you have to be careful what you're showing them. It would be so much smarter of Atticus to chill it a little bit on like the smart ass answers and the stare downs and the like little too quick responses that just sort of give away the fact that he's not nearly as innocent as he's pretending he is. But he can't help it. He can't help it. He keeps it. It's all right on the surface. Like, who he is who he is, no matter who he's talking to, which in some ways is admirable. And you could say that there's like an honesty inherent in that, but it's not really smart now, is it? It's maybe brave, but I don't know that that's it. Because like I said, I feel like there's a lot of ego involved. So bravery might be the opposite of the word I need. Nevertheless, the whole conversation just winds up going nowhere. They have nothing to hold on him. They obviously want to come inside, and he repeats himself that like, no, you're not coming into my house. I don't know you, and I don't need to let you in. And then fucking Fagel sits there and points at him and says, we'll be watching. And when Jimenez calls back, Detective Fagels, do you have other people to talk to? Fagel said, yeah, like the judge. Oh, Fagels, who are you? You're the worst. That's who you are. I hate him. So he goes inside, Atticus, and is just like, hey, good job there, Oberon, on keeping quiet. And this is when he does the camouflaging of his plants. He's like basically going through his house, finding anything that the cops could have any sort of problem with, and is putting it away or hiding it or, getting rid of it entirely. And then he calls Hal. Sorry, I think I called him Hawk earlier. Isn't it Hal? If anybody's in the chat that can remind me of his last name, or is Hal his last name and his first name is something else? I put in a call to Hal on his cell phone and explained my extraordinary needs for a Sunday. If Jimenez could get a warrant on a Sunday, then I could get a lawyer. Hal said he'd send over a junior associate to guard the castle. Is he a pack member? I asked. Yes. Does that matter? Just tell him to keep a sharp ear and nose out. If one of my Pantheon is behind this, then there might be some magical skullduggery going on. The police might bring someone along who isn't entirely human, for example. They probably won't show up at all. I've never heard of a search warrant for a dog. You may be the most paranoid man I've ever met. I'm certainly the longest lived you've ever met. Point taken. I'll tell him. I like that little exchange a lot. So Atticus heads over, and he sees, first of all, Mrs. McDonagh, which she is already drunk, apparently goes to church drunk. She calls it being mellow. I get mellow for church. Yeah, all right, lady. And then he heads over to his shop. And this is, I had forgotten already because of all of the other excitement, that he was about to have the witch Emily come in for her tea. And it's so funny. So Emily comes in and immediately sticks her tongue out at him. And Melina follows her in. So it turns out that Melina is something like Emily's guardian. She tells him later that she saved Emily from being raped during, I think, World War II. It was Nazis. And if I'm not mistaken, and she has sort of taken charge of her ever since. And it's an interesting relationship that they have, considering that they don't look like they're like that disparate in ages on the surface. But we do find out that Melina's like 140, I believe. So I think she says Emily's something like 80. She's younger. And she really reprimands Emily and is like embarrassed at the fact that this girl is acting this way. And apparently this is not unusual behavior for Emily. Like, she's not somebody who behaves herself in the best of circumstances. And there's a really interesting moment here where Atticus is looking at her and thinking about her hair and how gorgeous it is, and kind of like gets lost in that thought for a minute. And then all of a sudden his amulet like zings him a little bit and shuts it down, and he realizes that there is some sort of magic that she, like a charm that she put on her hair in order to beguile him into giving her something. And apparently it's a good thing that he has this amulet to shut that down, because she winds up asking him a lot of really pressing questions a little bit later, and he may have just blurted all this shit out if he wasn't properly protected. He specifically says, too, that meant it was not the everyday sort of witch's magic. So I'm wondering why she would use a magic that isn't witch's magic. Like, just wondering what that magic is, you know? So, and she's a really beautiful woman, and she's dressed very differently from Emily, and he calls her classy, whereas Emily is not, which I take issue with, because just how people dress is really no indication of how classy they are or not, but okay. And then there's this moment of Emily being forced to apologize to him, which she barely can get through without vomiting. And when it's time for her to drink her tea, she chugs that shit down and excuses herself immediately and leaves Atticus and Melina some time to talk to each other. So this conversation is really, it's one of those where I'm just like, in the moment thinking, I wish that you would trust them a little bit more. When he talks to Brighid later, it seems like it was a good thing that he didn't trust them. But I have to be honest, I'm not sure I trust Brighid. So, you know. But anyway, I'm getting ahead of myself. So, she asks him, first of all, if he has the sword. He admits that he does. She asks if it is on the premises. He has to say yes. And she asks him how old he is. And all he says is at least as old as Radomila, which apparently is enough to impress her. And it's like one of those sort of double-edged things where he says at least as old as Radomila, even though he's far, far older than Radomila. So, like, he's not lying, but it is not remotely enough to give an indication of how much power he has, which is he knows exactly why she's asking. Figuring out how old he is a good assessment for somebody's, like, abilities. Like, how has he stayed alive this long? This is not normal. But she doesn't know that. And so giving her even this little bit of information lets her know that he's not to be fucked with, but doesn't quite tell her the extent of what he's capable of. And it's a smart move, because you don't want your enemies and potential enemies to know what you are able to pull off. You want them to underestimate you so that you can then completely fuck their shit up if you need to. And then last question, which member of the Tuatha De Danann have you recently seen in corporeal form? The Morrigan, I replied. Her eyes widened. The Morrigan? She squeaked. Oh, now I got it. She had expected me to say Brez, and then she could surmise that I had killed him with the sword that I still had on the premises. But now she couldn't surmise that at all. She could surmise instead that since I'd seen the Morrigan and lived, I had a death goddess in my 5 or my circle or whatever. And maybe the reason Brez didn't come home last night was because of the Morrigan and not because of me. But this line of reasoning implied that she knew about Brez coming to see me yesterday in the first place. So he straight up asks how many people in your coven are sided with Aengus over and against me, and she won't say. And then she tries to press him and be like, but we want you to succeed. We are not allied with him, and we want to be able to help you. Can't you let us help you? Tell us what you have planned, and we can like help you augment whatever. And he is not falling for this bit, not one little bit. And she gets kind of irritated at the fact that he is refusing to meet her halfway on this. Like, and this was what made me feel like the irritation that she has doesn't feel like the irritation of somebody who was trying to work a con and got thwarted. She genuinely seems like frustrated that he doesn't believe her. Like, she really did want to do something to help, and it turns out she's not going to get to, and she's like, you idiot. We could all be on the same side here, but you have to make this hard. This could be us, but you play him. So this is what makes me feel like, I kind of feel like Emily's a pain in the ass and obviously like doing some shit that's not exactly within everybody. Because Melina says to Emily, if she doesn't apologize, that she's going to have her excised from the coven because you're in so much trouble already, Emily. So I feel like this thing that Emily's pulling isn't the first of like she's a bad actor, it seems. And because of that, the fact that Melina is saying that she wants to help, I feel like we're supposed to be predisposed to not like the witches and not trust them because of Emily, when in fact she's not really representative of what they're all like. I'm just spitballing here, but something about the way this is all going just doesn't add up to me because of Melina seeming pretty straightforward about everything. The only thing that she isn't really that we see in this scene is that she has that charm on her hair, which apparently starts to work its magic on somebody else in the store, and she tells them to go away and then like takes the charm off her hair. And does it in this real surreptitious way, hoping that he's not going to notice that she's doing this, but he totally does. So, yeah, this whole thing, she says, you are being flippant with me now, and I do not appreciate it. You have implied that a member of the Tuatha De Danann is afraid of you, and yet you offer no credible reason why this may be true. It doesn't matter to me whether you believe it or not. Melina's eyes turned icy as she glared at me. It seems we have some trust issues to work out between us. You think? Tell me your coven isn't plotting with Aengus Og against me. My coven isn't plotting against you with Aengus Og. Now make me believe it. That appears impossible, but you have a document with Radomila's blood on it. I think that indicates that she trusts you, at least. I was under the impression that you and Radomila had exchanged favors in the past and were cordial to each other. Yes, that's true. That was before members of her coven began sleeping with my mortal enemy. Well, I do not know how to allay your suspicions, so I will take my leave for now. So yeah, this whole thing, I don't know, there's something about the feel of it. I feel like she was being genuine, and he has every reason to be suspicious, and I don't blame him one bit for the way that he behaved here, and I don't think he was being unreasonable. I think she was being a little unreasonable in assuming that he was going to just like take even if she was being honest, that she would believe him outright and just like, you know, take this offer of help. But yeah, this whole, and the fact that he has a document with Radomila's blood in it, that's another thing. Like, is that maybe that's not her blood? Maybe that's part of a setup too, to get him to believe that, but I'm wondering if he would not recognize it if it weren't her blood. Like, is there a vibration or aura that it gives off that he would be able to tell it wasn't hers? Plus the fact that she flat out says, my coven isn't plotting against you with Aengus Og. Now, she rephrases it. And this is the thing. He says, tell me your coven isn't plotting with Aengus Og against me. She doesn't say, my coven isn't plotting with Aengus Og. She says, my coven isn't plotting against you with Aengus Og. which makes me think that she's like kind of parsing words here and saying my coven isn't plotting against you. It's not you that's the target, but we are with Aengus Og. It's just we're against somebody else, and you happen to just be part of it, but it's not really specifically about you. But, you know, call me paranoid. I don't know. This is why I overanalyze things. It's why I do what I do. So finally, she gets up and leaves the store, and he is in the middle of like just trying to get on with his day when fucking Morgan flies through the door like a crow again and scares off all the customers. I love the fact because, you know, I wasn't sure exactly how obvious they are, these gods, to the average person. And Perry, when all had exited except for Perry, I told him to take a lunch break. You're just gonna take care of that giant freaking bird all by yourself then? He asked, never taking his eyes from it. The one with the razor-sharp beak and the spooky eyes that look like they're lit with the fires of hell. Yeah, don't worry about it, I said casually. Enjoy yourself. Take your time. Well, okay, if you're sure. See you later then. I love that moment so much. So the Morgan has come to tell him that Brighid is coming. And he just starts swearing and jumping up and down and flipping out because he's sure that Brighid is coming to kill him because he killed Brez, her husband. Spoiler alert. That is not why she's coming. And the Morgan, when he tells her about the fact that Flittish was there to warn him also, that she realizes there's some other shit going down that she is not being included in or consulted on, and she does not care for it. And she says, I dislike being left out. It makes me feel that I am a target, which is fair. Like, because one could say, oh, it's a little bit petty, isn't it? That you're just pissed that you're not involved. But it's way more than that. If you're not involved and this is like life or death machinations happening, it is a very reasonable assumption that you are a target of those machinations. So this isn't just like, oh, you guys aren't including me, like fucking, Pierce Hawthorne on Community wanting to be invited to a game of cards. This is, oh, they're hiding serious fucking shit from me. And we can't have that because I need to know that I'm safe and don't need to like constantly have my back up. So Brighid just strolls on in. And by stroll, I mean appears in a ball of fire. I'd no sooner finished speaking than a ball of flame blew through my door, breaking the glass and melting my door chimes. It extinguished itself in front of me, leaving a tall, majestic, fully armored goddess in its place. It was Brighid, goddess of poetry, fire, and the forge, which is kind of rad. I always wonder, there are so many gods that are, you know, they're the god of, here's 7 things. And they're all real weird, random things. Like, he's the god of lightning, broken down cars, and maps. And you're just like, oh, what? So I really wonder, poetry and fire and the forge. Like, those pretty well go together, I could say. Poetry being like an impassioned sort of language, specifically fire and the forge go together. Okay, but you know, it's still like there's moments where I'm always like, that's a weird combo of things to go together. So he gets very distracted very quickly by the fact that Brighid is super, super hot. And this is what makes me feel like I don't trust Brighid, is because Atticus, as we know, is really, really stupid around pretty women. And we've like hardly gotten to know Atticus yet, and we already know that. I feel like Brighid's gotta be aware of that. And she comes in here looking hot, being charming, not killing him like he expected. And yeah, he's just so relieved to not be murdered immediately that her explanations as to why things are going down the way they are, he's perfectly willing to swallow them. And when she asks if he'll be on her side, he straight up says yes immediately, which I've got to assume is some sort of binding contract, right? I feel real bad about that. I don't like him just saying yes. I feel like that's never, like, when you're dealing with fae and gods, you just don't want to, like, commit yourself. Does that make sense? So he tells her the story because she wants to know exactly what happened with Brez. And he tells her, and he tries to keep it on the DL about the way that he was able to see through Brez's glamour, which it's an interesting moment because he doesn't want her to notice the necklace he has on and how powerful it is. But then later, he just straight up tells her the power that it has. And he takes it... Oh, okay, I'm realizing retrospectively how fucking stupid he is here. Oh my God, Atticus. Like, I felt like he was being an idiot, but I didn't appreciate quite the extent of it because later he tells her not only that his magic is in his necklace, but he takes it off to demonstrate to her that whatever she wants to do to him spell-wise will work perfectly well as long as he's not wearing it. So he's basically revealed his entire, like, defense strategy to a fucking god. Ew. Ooh, this feels real bad. And only on her word. Like, I don't know what the rules here are, because in Dresden Files, when he's dealing with the Fae, they are not able to lie. They are able to speak in such a way that they can insinuate things that are not true, but they never say it. They just allow you to put certain pieces together. They can withhold certain parts of the truth and twist things. So I'm not sure if Brighid is under those same restrictions. Can she lie? Or is she forced to sort of just twist and manipulate the truth? Either way, he capitulates and agrees to join her side and believes everything that she says about her face-off with Aengus just solely on her say-so, which seems like a very big problem to me. And she tells him that she believes his story about Brez and that he has relieved her of an odious task and she owes him her thanks. And explains that Aengus has sort of had teamed up with Brez. And she wasn't entirely, like, behind this. Like, it doesn't seem like Brez consulted with her. Also, he introduces her to Oberyn and allows her to bind herself to Oberyn so that she could talk to him. Also seems, I don't know. I just don't trust any of this. I feel like he's giving her way too much leeway and too many ins. And I don't know what her binding herself to Oberyn can accomplish. I don't know what the rules are there either. So this is making me very nervous. So anyway, she asks Oberyn straight up, did you kill someone? I've heard you did. And over on the side there, Atticus is making her tea and, like, kind of is like, oh shit. And Oberyn admits that he did and says, I didn't mean to. Flittish commanded me and I had to obey. And she says, well, I don't blame you. In a way, it's my fault. I sent Flittish to see your master. And he's like, what? Atticus, again, just he's overhearing all of this. And finally he's like, okay, can you wait for a second and let me come over there with the tea before you, like, keep talking about all of this these revelations you're making? So she says, my brother Aengus Og is moving against me. He seeks to supplant me as supreme amongst the Tuath Danann, but I suspect this is only a stepping stone to something larger, which I really wonder what that is. To that end, whatever it may be, He has been collecting all the enchanted weapons and armor he can. He even got my fool of a husband to ask me to make a set of armor that would stop the blade of Fragorach. Not asking him why, I made some ridiculous-looking stuff and told him it would make him invincible. He promptly put it on and got himself killed, so well done, Druid. I would have had to kill him myself if things had gone much farther. As it is, I would still like to avoid direct conflict with Aengus if I can. Descending to the level of battle is distasteful, especially with one's own brother. And this, she says, Aengus wants Fragorach because he believes it will penetrate my armor. And he asks, won't it? And she says that she doesn't know for sure, which is an interesting proposition. This armor is an honest attempt to forge something immune to Fraggle unlike what I gave to Brez. I'd rather not test it. And Atticus assures her that he'd never use it against her, and she laughs and is like, oh, I know that, and I'd rather Aengus not wield it against me either. I think you are fit to wield it, and I would rather it remain in your possession, but Aengus definitely wants it, and he is manipulating events to make sure it falls to him, and you may have noticed some of that already. So, yeah, she tells him about Flittish and the fact that she sent Flittish to him to warn him, but that the park ranger was the work of Brez doing Angus's bidding. And they will find a way to take the sword from you, even if you resist. Aengus hopes you will, because the police will pull their weapons and take the sword from you at the first sign of resistance. He will have no trouble taking it from them after that. And then drops this bomb. There is more. Aengus has recruited a coven of witches against you. They call themselves the Sisters of the Three Auroras. I felt the spike in my blood pressure immediately. But they claim to want nothing to do with Aengus. One of them is betting him, and she asked me to brew a tea to make him impotent. Aengus arranged the entire thing with them. It is both a way to give him just cause to kill you, and a way to get the witches close to you. But I have Radamelia's blood, I sputtered. My outrage was sloshing over and turning to spittle. Her coven is pledged to do me a favor in return for my services. They are counting on you not being around much longer to collect, Brighid said. If you ask them to do anything that conflicts with Aengus interest, this Radamela will be conveniently unavailable. What do the witches get out of the deal? Aengus must have promised them something huge. I do not know for sure. My guess is that he has promised them free traveling privileges through Tir na Nog. I gave a low whistle. That would allow them to become a very powerful coven. Yes, but they are not the only group he is making promises to. He has enlisted the help of the Fomorians, he has stirred up a large number of the Fae against me, and I suspect he has made some bargains with Hell. Oh, really? Ah! Well, Hell. All right. So that's what she winds up giving him the cold fire for. She straight up says, are you willing to get involved, Druid? I am asking you to choose sides, my side specifically. Done, I said instantly. What moral dilemma was there? She wanted me to keep the sword. Aengus wanted to take it. She liked me alive. Aengus didn't. She was hot. Aengus was not. And there we get to the crux of the matter. Don't we, Atticus? And she smiles at him, and he feels all fluttery. And then she says, "Kill Aengus for me, and I shall reward you." And he's like, "Oh, yeah." I mean, taking his side and being like, "Hey, kill Aengus, those aren't exactly the same thing, are they?" So this is when she tries to give him the gift of the power of cold fire, and he has to reveal the fact that she's not able to give him this gift because of the runes and sigils and whatnot on his necklace. And let's see, I can use magic. Does not iron prevent it? I've discovered a solution to the old problem. Remarkable that you have found one where I have not. Have you truly tried? No, she admitted. I thought it was impossible. Turns out it's only next to impossible. Have you tested it against demons? It prevents succubi from casting their charms on me. But you have not had to deal with hellfire or any other hellish attacks. Not yet. You will need to test it soon. You need a way to deal with demons. Lots of them, if I am right about who Aengus has been talking to. What does this cold fire do? It allows you to burn them from within, but it burns like ice burns. It takes a lot of energy and it drains you. Even if you draw power from the earth, it will drain you. But it will save you from being overwhelmed in a fight. Alas, I cannot give it to you. Sure you can, I said, and took the necklace off. It changed my aura immediately, and I became nervous. She could hurt me as easily as help me now if she liked. Yeah, well, she can also hurt you pretty easily now that she knows exactly what to do to make you vulnerable. But whatever, okay, Atticus. And she asks him to teach her how he made this necklace. And he's like, listen, I'm sorry, but I promised I would never tell anybody. I'm sure you can figure it out. But I do need you to know that it took me 750 years to figure it out, so you may need to be pretty patient. And instead of getting like offended or upset by this, she looks kind of excited about the fact that there's a new challenge and that there's something out there that she didn't know regarding forging and creating, which I really do like that reaction, to be honest. So, am I right in thinking this necklace will work for no one but you? Yes, it is bound specifically to me. For anyone else, it would simply be jewelry. So I feel like that was another, like, she's thinking, well, could I just, like, take this? But no. I don't know that she's thinking that. I don't know that. I'm following a train of suspicion, I guess. This time I felt something, a rush of heat and ice through my veins and a spell of dizziness. Now you have the power of cold fire, Brighid said. It works only on hellspawn, and both you and your targets must be touching the earth. Point at your targets with your right hand, collect your will, and say something, and they will be destroyed. Though I warn you again, it takes a tremendous amount of your energy, so use it sparingly, and remember it will also take a few moments for them to die. So, yeah. She finishes up by being like, I figure you're going to be dead by dawn anyway, but best of luck, and takes off. So then we get to the final chapter here, which is my favorite of this bunch, because it gets so bananas. So we get a little background, first of all, on Mr. Submergian, who called the INS on him once, and he had to get his papers, his illegal documents, and get them to go away, which is the initiation of their antipathy towards each other. And I think he says it's the first time that he sent Oberyn over to poop on his lawn was because of this. We have not been on good terms since then. We never were, of course, but at least for the first few years he cheerfully ignored me. When he began to harass me, I suspected him of being either abysmally stupid or a pawn of the Fae. Turns out he was just mean, and dog shit on his lawn turned him into Flibbertigibbet, a regular Lebanese Tom o' Bedlam. Now I suspected I was a pawn of the Fae. I didn't know whose pawn I was, precisely. And he calls a contractor to do emergency replacement on his shop door, but he doesn't get it done before the police show up, so that gets their attention. They show up and, there's a bunch of broken glass and they're like, well, what happened here? And he can't give them he can't tell them the goddess of the forge came through my door as a fireball. So he just is like, well, somebody had a problem with my return policy, which I'm like, that might explain broken glass actually, but, I'm pretty sure she melted your door chimes. I'm not sure if they can tell that happened, but I feel like that's not going to have the same sort of easy explanation. He tells Oberyn to leap up on top of a table by the wall and casts his camouflage over him and tells him not to move at all because he's not entirely sure whether or not they'll be able to see through the camouflage. So just don't draw any attention to yourself if you can help it. And just as the cops are like getting out of their car and about to head into the building, Hal shows up. Hal Hawk. I was right. There's Hawk in there. I feel so much better now. That was bothering me. Halahawk sprang out the door as if summoned. Pardon me, are you Detective Fagels? Stand aside, sir. I'm on official police business. If your business is with Third Eye Books or its owner, then your business is with me. I am the attorney of record for Mr. Atticus O'Sullivan. You're the attorney of record? Then who was the other guy at his house? One of my associates. They called me and reported that your search of his house was not entirely legal, and I assure you that we will be making a complaint, perhaps filing suit. We had a warrant signed by a Tempe judge. Our search was entirely legal. But that warrant gives you permission to search for an Irish wolfhound or similar dog, I believe, and nothing more. Is that correct, Detective? Fagels didn't want to answer with a flat-out yes, so he tried to sound defiant as he replied, That's what the warrant says. An Irish wolfhound is a very large breed of dog. I saw the specific dog you're looking for before he ran away, and I assure you he weighs almost as much as you. That being given, we can assume that the dog could not possibly be hiding in a drawer, or a dresser, or in kitchen cupboards, or underneath a basil plant. Yet, you and your colleague searched through all those things at my client's house in clear violation of his civil rights. And they try to deny it, and he's like, yeah, my buddy took videos, so y'all can stuff it and stop lying. So basically what he's doing here is saying, so I know you'd pulled some shit, and I'm just saying, don't try and pull that shit again, because it's not going to work. And they're like, fine, we won't. So they come inside. First thing Fagels does is zero in on that sword. And also, the first thing that Atticus does is notice that there is some kind of binding on Fagels. He says, a band of green knotwork wreathed Fagel's skull, almost like one of those Roman laurels. That was the primary method by which he was being controlled, but interlaced with those strands were very fine blue and red threads. I could not break the green binding without breaking those too, and I didn't know what those were for, though I assumed they weren't friendly by their design. Fail-safes, perhaps, or magical booby traps, or merely something for me to waste my time on. But the other officers had nothing about them beyond their normal human auras. So it's only Fagels that he needs to worry about. Fagels zeroes in on this sword, so he can see through the camouflage, but only the camouflage on the sword, evidently. Tries to say that, like, it's illegal for him to have it, and Hawk steps in and is like, yeah, no, it ain't. Sorry. And cites all of these different things that keep it from being a problem. And then Atticus decides that he's going to mess with the binding that he can see around Fagels' head. And I'm just going to read how this goes. My hunch was that the blue knots represented the binding that allowed him to see the cloak, which was in turn allowing him to penetrate the camouflage. So if I unraveled that particular binding, the problem of my sword would quite literally disappear. The trouble was that breaking the blue knots would snap the red ones too, and while I could appreciate the craft that went into these particular bindings, I still had no way of telling precisely what Aengus had brought there. So he just does it. It was one of those decisions you make when you have too much testosterone bubbling around in your system, or when you've been raised in a culture of ridiculous machismo, as I was. The blue knot was absurdly fragile. It snapped almost immediately with the gentlest of mental tugs, and the red one snapped along with it. Definitely a trap, the concussive sort. I felt a whump against my face, like getting hit unexpectedly full force with a pillow, and I saw Hal's head snap back abruptly. He fell over backwards, snarling in surprise. Fagels yelped and grabbed at his head, and then as Hal and I were recovering, Hal red-faced and eyes a bit yellow, his wolf close to the surface, Fagels went completely batshit and drew his gun on me. So here we get a pretty long scene of Fagels losing his goddamn mind. He's got a gun drawn, and he's just yelling and ranting about how he assaulted me, even though Atticus is clearly like halfway across the room at this point. He's been standing there passively more than 5 feet away from you the entire time. He just hit me upside the head. He most certainly did not, and that security camera right there will prove it, Hal exclaimed. Well, something hit my head, and it sure as hell wasn't me. So they go back and forth with this because they all felt it too. And so Hal specifically says that, like, I know I felt something too. I know something was, I don't know what to tell you. It wasn't him. And Fagels just keeps insisting, I want to know what it was. Who hit me? What was it? And then all of a sudden, where'd the sword go? And Hal says that he never saw the sword. I don't know if he's telling the truth here. Nevertheless, it's beautiful to watch how upset Fagels gets over it. And then finally, all of the other cops in the room are starting to get like downright embarrassed over the way that Fagels is freaking out here. Detective Jimenez sighed and put away his gun, and all the other cops relaxed too, save for Fagels. They were beginning to look a bit embarrassed. The dog isn't here, Fagels, he said. Let's go. Put the gun away. Fagels gritted his teeth in frustration, and the green wreath around his head flared menacingly. And that's when he shot me. Oh! You should have heard the shriek of, like, delighted laughter I let out when I reached that sentence. And that's when he shot me. Because I really don't know what happens here. I don't know why the wreath flares when that like, I'm assuming that Aengus is maybe, like, right outside and just telling him what to do and how to handle everything. And like, him shooting is a result of Aengus losing his temper and just being like, fine, just shoot him. Or maybe it's just like a binding that's meant to, like, make him determined to accomplish his goal, and that, like, in the event that something stands in his way, he becomes really irrational because he's driven by the spell. I don't know, but I'm dying to find out. It says that there are a couple people here in the chat, but I don't see any comments or anything. So I just want to, like, double check because sometimes chats do freeze up and not work, and I just don't want to make sure that there hasn't been people trying to comment or ask questions along the way that I haven't been able to see. My apologies if any of you were trying to ask questions and it's not coming through. Oh, okay, good. No, somebody just commented, so it's fine. I just wanted to double check because I've had that happen before, and then I'll, like, sign off and it's suddenly, all of a sudden, I'll see all of them pop up after, like, it's wrapped, and I'm like, God damn it. Well, thank you guys for coming, two of you. Appreciate it. And, yeah, again, thank you very much to, is it Susan Hayes this time, who commissioned this episode. I really appreciate it, Susan. And I hope that you guys have been enjoying the coverage. And if you're interested in commissioning an episode, you can go to unspoiledpodcast.com/shop. And you can also, join the Facebook group at facebook.com/groups/spoilmepod. All right, guys. Well, thank you all again so much. And hopefully I get to see you all soon with a new episode. Toodaloo, motherfuckers.
That was an Unspoiled Network podcast.